Where's my freedom? What became of my voice? What became of my voice? Where's my freedom? What became of my voice? Am I just another echo, lost in the noise? You promised liberty, you promised peace. Said this was a land where hate would cease. But I see the same lies, the same old game. Caught in the crossfire, upon the blame. I'm tired of being a victim of shame. Labeled and boxed, then tossed in the flames.
All I wanna say is they don't really care about us.
They don't really care about us. No, they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. No, they don't really care about us.
They don't care about us. All I wanna say is they don't care about us.
NAACP, BLM, voices raised, names on the list. They say they see change, but we're caught in the mist. Red or blue tie, just different suits. Talking the same talk, they don't walk in our boots. Every debate, every press release, a stage performance, but where's the peace? Man, if King was here, he'd be marching still. He'd be seeing through the smoke, fight for real.
All I wanna say is they don't really care about us.
They don't really care about us.
Nah, they don't really care about us.
No, they don't really care about us.
All I wanna say is
that they don't really care about us.
No,
they don't really care about us. It just was really, it hits home, and it's obviously that they don't care about us.
They don't care about us. They don't care about us. They don't care about us.
See, some things in life they don't want to show. What's buried deep down, what's hid below. If Malcolm was here, he'd shout and fight. He'd see the same battle, he'd make it right. Everybody's mad, situation's tight. Tensions building, wrong versus right. Black or not, it's the news they sell. Slinging division, a story to tell. Kick me, push me, mark me as weak, but you'll never break me. My spirit won't leak. You can't twist the truth, painted in lies. But one day we'll rise and open your eyes.
They took our history, but they can't take the songs of redemption.
Good morning, and welcome to the Urban Conservative. This morning I'm talking about solidarity, from solitary to scandal, exposing the brutal truths of power and corruption in Minnesota. But first, I got something new. I got something exclusive for y'all. Fresh off the deck. It's exclusive. It's new, and I want to give it up to my boy Circumstantial Saint, Trip Young. So this is exclusive, and please listen. Matrix Glitch by the Urban Conservative. Whoops, my bad. It's on the Urban Conservative, but featuring, I shouldn't even say featuring, Circumstantial Saint, featuring Trip Young. Matrix Glitch. Is that enough? That's not enough. Let me be quiet.
Yeah,
it's too early.
Oh, fucking shit. When I criticize, I ain't saying you're dumb. I just think that we could be doing this smarter. You're running around making my man's a martyr. Striking me harder, now watch me become a more powerful one, like something you couldn't imagine. Like Saturn and magic, like it's tragic. I'm shattering caps like some kind of frangible fungus. Man, this is humongous. The way I'm talking about knees on the voices of free and as humble and please. I'm just trying to see different hands on the mic, not that right, son. I'm a strike one and ignite them in the night. I'm making them take flight. I'm burnout, no Phoenix. Yeah, that's Black Lives and Beatniks. We got a rebirth, no remix. Yeah, that's 3-4, no 5-6. Go rat-a-tat-tat on the drum. 3 clips at the hip. I got strips on the drip, and you know you come ready for one. Cause lately I'm walking for safety. See, stick with my paces sedately. Cause what have you done for me lately? Those words, they don't sound so saintly. So go on, go ahead, just don't hate me. I'm running a rhyme and speaking in time, so go on, go ahead and just pace me. Hating, she loving like Lacey. My girl, she going like crazy. She puffing this pipe like it's hazy. Bill Gates, I'm working like lazy, but I'm taking these spots to straighten. Cause damn, he good looking, ain't he? And I have to be aware of these cultural perceptions of beauty that let me look into a mirror and say that I'm gorgeous just the way that I am. And man makes mockery of his own mortality with no fear of brutality or the demons outside of he when they're living a life of luxury, grain-fed and well-read, putting quotes around well bred if they want white bread, cause I'm talking brought up, not brought in. So stop a pup at a cup and pick up one of these wolves with cause, cause we can't take 2 times, no twins, no fake guns. I'm just grim, call me corpse friend, no lead wins. It's not fantasy, trust me, I really wish it was just me, but this is a force that's riding me, brightening, enlightening them, rip, rewriting them, coming correct, not coming erect, but breaking down borders that bind me. At an injustice, that's where you're gonna find me. Loosen up line after line, me linen the lads up in livery, making them quivery with our impeccable delivery, making them shivery as we step to a sin, putting the pin to what you're living in. And I'm seeing some pus. Fuck, isn't that enough?
What have you done for me lately? Take my apologies and let me be. Don't acknowledge my courage. I can close the door and take the key, slice the cake and not leave the piece, so I always knew what to expect.
Fuck, isn't that enough?
Fuck, isn't that enough? I grew through the weeds to rise to the peak, and I did that setting me as a priority. Who are you to tell me who and how to be? Who are you to tell me I haven't paid my dues? Who even said I had to? I chose to abide, but there's no more lies left that I will oblige and dismiss. Rinds of lemon and it burns the wound, salt on my lips, ready to kiss and have another night filled with bliss. I move far away from you and that shit. Life moves. Patterns and cycles, time and perception, a beautiful manifestation of dreams you hold true to bring you made your dreams nightmares, and now you think I'm supposed to be savior? But last week I was the devil. No one can keep up with your level of hell you chose to put me through. Instead of holding your own to account, I got tired of seeing myself that I used to entertain, but the never-ending stories of glory from rides of pain diluted my fears into sniff. And this stuff became fluff. So the fluff got tossed, and I don't know who you are, but you don't know me. Don't even try to think you can tell me anything.
Fuck, isn't that enough?
When I criticize, I ain't saying you're dumb. I'm saying that there's other perceptions to think about, and you could be one less person stuck in the individual self. Get out the mind fuck matrix for your sedated and frustration. Pucker lips like a thick frame and pucker lips like a thick frame. Matrix for your sedated and frustration. Pucker lips like a thick frame and skin tight latex. This glitch is dismissed, cause many don't want to take the trip to see for the first time what life could truly be. But the crossroads, the mental acrobatics, tumbles and hurdles seem daunting to say the least. No one wants to do the work and take on this beast. Trip got me tripping, think about this delivery. I got secrets to tell, no idle time, but time to kill. Glitches to switch and I'm right on the heels. Niggas is running straight up to the hills. Beware when the saints come marching in, beating the drums to the rhythm of one. The people come packed with the fire of the sun. They can't take away what they can't control. The beats that sway your judgment and reactions alone. Let the emotions take you to places unknown. Seek counsel from enemies and find out what you truly mean to be. Counting, the days don't last. We know this, stop counting. Stop drowning in debt. Cut the cord so they can sit on regret. They birthed a saint, take him to hell, cover that well and make sure you abolish the laws that make us yell. Congolese medals keep the world heavy in gluttony. I must have missed the part where we ignore and keep on fucking the mother that birthed all of humanity. Give the elites, the lobbyists, billionaires, political puppets that are in the hands of corporations and Wall Street private equity firms a big fuck you. Cause we smell fishy cutting is something you couldn't imagine. This shit is humongous, but just another common occurrence of colonial powers discussing the masses with masses with I this and that and the newest fad and the most fucked up nonsensical fascist dad. Make them hurt and have fun. Think about where it hits and fuck the bullshit. Go ahead and twerk.
Fuck, isn't that enough?
We've been putting in work.
Fuck.
This marriage is done, cause what have you done for me lately? Those words, they don't sound so saintly. So go on ahead, just don't hate me. I just want us all to eat. I just want us all to have clean air to breathe. Plastic-free seas and wildlife can flourish and not be bothered by humanity. Really, I just want all humans to be full and happy. Fuck, isn't that enough?
Man, that was my boy, motherfucking Circumstantial Saint. Trip Young. Man, plug in. Remember My Name, the other cut by Circumstantial Saint. That's out right now. You can go on the Bandcamp. It's also streaming on Apple Music, Spotify, all your streaming platforms. It's streaming. So go out there, get it, because he works hard. And it's crazy that we sit here and we support others But we don't support locally. We don't support American, and that's crazy to me. Is because I see people wearing like Jordans, and but then we're doing all these boycotts. But yet we're not doing anything. You know what I'm saying? We're not supporting the people that are trying to make a difference. Where you don't have to go to Walmart, you don't have to go to Target, you don't have to go to these places that keep us down. This capitalism. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy because ever since COVID, we've seen billions of dollars go into our communities. Billion, and it's on paper. There's no lie about this. It's all facts. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy, crazy work that nobody makes a difference because it's illegal. It's not illegal. It's legal for political corruption. It's legal for political corruption, and that's sad as hell. So, man, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. From solitary to scandal, exposing the brutal truths of power and corruption in Minnesota. And I'm going to talk about that shit because it's sad to me is that we have things that are continually going on, right? Continually going on. But before I get into that, I want to talk about policing, right? I want to talk about how did we get here because we're saying names. So if people don't remember Jasmine Tucker, Akron, Ohio, this morning they came out, and I don't like really doing this, but I want people to learn and I want people to know the difference. So this is the autopsy findings in Jasmine Tucker's shooting death, right? And I want people to pay close attention because words do matter. Words do matter. And watch the words that the medical examiner uses in Akron, Ohio. And in my eyes, it really doesn't point blame at anybody, or even it leaves more questions than it gives us answers as a community. And I mean that because we have to put our future generations' hands in these people who are in power, but do you trust them? Because words do matter.
Staff for the Summit County Executive's Office. On behalf of the executive, we extend our condolences to the family of Jasmine Tucker, as well as all members of the community who are struggling or overwhelmed by recent events. The Summit County Medical Examiner's Office is one of 9 departments within the County Executive's Office. Summit County is unique in that it employs the expertise of a medical examiner and not a coroner. It is important to note the difference between a medical examiner and a coroner. The titles are not interchangeable. A coroner is an elected lay person who does not always have professional forensic training. A medical examiner is appointed and has board certification in a medical specialty. The Summit County Medical Examiner's Office employs 3 full-time doctors and additional staff. The Medical Examiner's Office is independent from law enforcement agencies, and the work completed by the Medical Examiner's Office is the documentation of autopsy findings and investigation of circumstances related to the cause and manner of death of an individual. During the course of an autopsy examination, evidence related to the cause and manner of death is collected and secured so that it is available for any potential future legal proceedings. All of Summit County's doctors are forensic pathologists who have undergone training specific to determining the cause and manner of death and the collection and preservation of evidence for use in these legal proceedings. The autopsy of Jasmine Tucker was performed by Chief Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Robert Schott. The final report was created by Dr. Schott and contains the examination findings. Summit County's Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Lisa Kohler, completed a quality control review of the report and then co-signed the report, as is customary. This process of quality control report review takes place for all homicide deaths prior to the report being finalized. As it is with every investigation, the goal of the Summit County Medical Examiner's Office is to be able to provide an accurate assessment of the injuries sustained. The Ohio Revised Code is clear that the press is entitled to review the autopsy report, and as stated in our advisory, we have put into place a system by which members of the press can make an appointment to review the report. Because of the number of requests received to review the report, it was clear that relaying a summary of the autopsy findings to all of you was a more expeditious manner of ensuring that accurate information is disseminated. Today you will hear from Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lisa Kohler, who will provide a summary of those injuries sustained by Mr. Tucker, as well as some of the findings determined as a result of the autopsy. Dr. Kohler joined the medical examiner's office in 1998 and has been Summit County's chief medical examiner since 2001. She received her Doctor of Medicine from the Medical College of Ohio at Toledo. She completed a pathology residence at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and completed her forensic pathology fellowship with the chief medical examiner of Richmond, Virginia. She is board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology and forensic pathology. In addition to her duties as medical examiner, Dr. Kohler teaches as an assistant professor of pathology at Northeastern Ohio University College of Medicine. She is an expert witness in the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Her office maintains full accreditation with the National Association of Medical Examiners. At this time, I'd like to call Dr. Kohler to the podium.
Listen to the words that Dr. Kohler uses, because words do matter, and they wanted to name off all of her credentials, but why can't we get any answers? Because if you're that much of an expert, if you're that much of a credible expert, why are we getting any answers and we have more questions? So I don't understand that. It's like, are you protecting the system? Because I don't want to go through this again. I honestly, you know what everything that was, I watched it this morning before my podcast, and it's crazy to me is that the words that these people use to be able to shift accountability, to shift blame, right? And they're able to use that qualified immunity with certain words. And I'm really tired of police making bad decisions and making it seem like it's right. Using words that make it seem like it's okay. No, that's not. When are people going to stand up and face what is wrong, what is right, and not waver on it? And it doesn't matter if you're paid, it doesn't matter if it's your boss, it doesn't matter if it's the church, because that's why I say, we talk about these false prophets, but I started to say false prophets, PROFITS, false prophets, because of the fact of it is we're not getting anywhere. And how is it? Because there's been more money now than ever in our communities, but yet all of our communities are suffering. You look at Chicago, you look at Detroit, you look at Milwaukee, and I'm really going to talk about Milwaukee because I really don't think people fully understand is why is Milwaukee County building an ICE holding facility in one of the worst neighborhoods in Milwaukee? And shout out to Von Mays for pointing it out, because how is that going to affect people? How is that going to affect Black and brown bodies that are Americans and don't deserve to be hassled? So just think about that. And I'm going to say again, words matter.
Thank you, Greta. Good morning. I would also like to offer my condolences to the family and friends of Jasmine Tucker. Jasmine Tucker's autopsy was performed by Dr. Schott on November 29, 2024. Dr. Schott then created a report of findings that I later reviewed for quality control purposes. I co-signed that report on January 14th of 2025. The first part of the examination involves documenting, identifying characteristics, and noting medical therapies and injuries. Evidence of medical therapies included an endotracheal tube or breathing tube in his mouth, vascular access lines in the bones of his right shoulder and right lower leg, that's his left shoulder and right lower leg, a chest seal over a wound on his back, which is used to prevent air leakage from the lung cavities, a thoracostomy incision on the right and left chest, which are surgical incisions that allow treatment for the lungs, a sutured thoracotomy incision on the left chest, which is a surgical incision to treat the lung, and IV access in the right wrist to allow administration of fluids. The autopsy examination determined that Jasmine had 3 gunshot wounds. These injuries include the following. 2 gunshot wounds injured his torso and 1 injured his right arm. It's not known what order these wounds were inflicted or what position Jasmine was in at the time the wounds were inflicted. 1 wound entered the left mid-back and injured the spleen, stomach, diaphragm, left lung, and heart. That bullet exited the left lower chest. The wound was associated with bleeding into the chest cavity and into the abdominal cavity. A second wound entered the lower back just to the right of his spine and injured the small intestines and the abdominal wall. This bullet was recovered from the tissues of the abdominal wall just below the belly button area. The wound was associated with bleeding into the abdomen and lacerations of the small intestine. A third wound involved the right upper arm. This wound injured the muscle only. The arm bone and major vessel in the upper arm were not injured. The wound characteristics were not specific enough for us to indicate which wound was an entrance and which was an exit in that arm, and no bullet was recovered from that wound. Jasmine had no other significant traumatic injuries, and he had no significant medical diseases. Toxicology was positive for a marijuana metabolite in his blood. The cause of death ruling in this case was gunshot wounds to the torso. Cause of death describes the injury or the illness that results in the death of an individual. The manner of death was ruled homicide, shot by another. Our ruling of homicide is a medical conclusion. It is not a legal conclusion. It means death at the hands of another. The manner of death describes the circumstances surrounding the death of an individual, and we have 5 different choices there. The first would be natural, which is due to natural disease such as an infection, heart disease, or cancer. The second is accident, which is due to injury or poisoning that was not intended to cause harm. Suicide is an injury or a poisoning that was inflicted with the intent to cause self-harm or death. Homicide is just death at the hands of another. Undetermined is used when we don't have an ability to separate 2 competing manners of death based upon our investigation and our examination. I understand that there have been questions raised regarding the performance of gunshot residue testing. First, allow me to explain what gunshot residue testing is and some additional information regarding the testing. Although the technology used to demonstrate the presence or absence of gunshot residues is sound, there are many factors that contribute to false positives or false negative results. Gunshot residue testing can detect specific particles related to the discharge of a firearm, but the results of such testing are not conclusive as to whether an individual did in fact
I was going to
fire
use
a
big
weapon.
words. What the fuck does that mean?
The
We're gonna
particles
see
are
what it
very
means,
fine
though.
and easily dislodged from the skin by acts as simple as putting one's hands into one's pockets or even by sweating. A
Conclusive.
positive test does not indicate that a person fired a weapon. A negative test does not mean that the person tested did not fire a weapon or was not in the vicinity of a weapon. The FBI discontinued their gunshot
Tastes like
residue
motherfucker.
testing in 2006. Based upon the issues related to the interpretation of the testing and the ease with which particles can be dislodged from the skin, the medical examiner's office discontinued collecting these samples in 2016, and we no longer purchase the collection kits produced by my staff. Because of this, Jasmine Tucker's hands were not swabbed
Right.
and were not tested for gunshot residue testing.
But the bullets,
Upon
supposedly,
my signing of the report,
that they
members of the executive
found-
staff provided the report to Jasmine Tucker's family by way of their attorney, as was requested prior to this media announcement.
This time, we will take a limited number of questions. Please be
time.
aware that
Please be
Dr.
aware.
Kohler will not, excuse me, Dr. Kohler will not speculate, and we will not comment on the ongoing investigation
Always.
that's being completed by DCI.
Always.
Bob?
Why would anything be different?
Tell which gunshot was fatal and if any call
Listen.
on the scene would have
Listen.
left him
The sun.
for every die, in other words, and if they
I'm just kidding.
was there treatment given sooner, would that make a difference?
Okay, with regards to the lethal wounds, both of the wounds to the torso are lethal. The first one that I described that injured his heart and lungs would be more rapidly lethal. And with regards to rendering aid, because the heart was damaged by the gunshot wound injury, more rapid aid would not have changed the course of
Okay.
events here.
Other questions? Stephanie?
So, Dr. Kohler, you said that you weren't able to determine which way he was when he was shot, but how is he lying when, I guess, when they got to him? Are you able to say anything about the direction of the shots at all?
We are not able to indicate what position he was in at the time he was shot, or when we're going through the direction of the wounds. That is based as though he were standing in anatomic position, upright with his hands down to his side. We don't make assumptions as regards to the positioning of him versus someone else, and we don't have
So
that
they gotta
additional
show us
information at
that.
this time.
Yes, ma'am.
So you know how quickly he died?
We don't have knowledge of how quickly he died. The wound to his heart would have been very devastating, and it would have been rapid.
That's crazy.
Other questions?
Are all three shots from the same firearm?
We don't have that information.
I don't know if this is redundant to what Stephanie asked, but based on what you know and the video that's been out there, does it appear he was shot while he was running away?
Right.
We don't have that
The
information.
information. Because they don't want to blame it. They don't. That's
Is it
fucking
possible,
crazy.
do you know that sometimes you can be shot in one part of the body can be moved, and then you can be shot on the opposite side? Or
We're-
can you tell them any of that?
She's not going to speculate on that.
Right. It's not speculation, though.
Anything else?
Can you comment on the volume of blood, how much he may have bled out?
We don't know how much blood was lost. There was a small amount of blood in the cavities, but he had also undergone medical therapies, which would allow some of that blood to drain out, so we do not know.
Yes.
Are you able to tell what caliber bullet was used, or what type of bullet was used to kill him?
There was one bullet that was recovered from his body, and it was a small caliber.
For clarification, was he pronounced dead at the scene or at the hospital? You said it might have been devastating and potentially quick.
That's an important question.
He was pronounced at the hospital.
So was he still alive?
No, very true. Very true.
He was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
At the hospital.
Stephanie?
You said small caliber, are you able to give, I guess, more pronounced definition of what kind of bullet was recovered?
We do not analyze the bullet itself. It's just by looking at it, it was described as a small caliber.
So just to confirm, you said more rapid aid would not have changed the course of the events, meaning that it would be able to guard this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you all for being here today. As stated in our press advisory, if you have submitted a written request to review the autopsy report, you can do so by making an appointment with the medical examiner's office and reviewing that in their office during regular office hours. Thank you all for being here today.
See, this is my problem when it comes to all of this, right? It's because who signs her checks? Who is, her benefit isn't out here doing the right thing. No, I know evidence gets sent to cops. But, here's the thing of it is there's years and years and years and years of corruption that they like to say is against citizens to get whatever they want accomplished, right? Oh yeah, no, I agree, and it needs an independent investigation, and I hopefully Jasmine Tucker's family gets that is because they said they saw him running, so that's why they shot. So I would really hope that they would get somebody that depending on this. Then we got it came. Here's the thing of it is, and I'm gonna be honest, right? Is and I'm going to get into it. This really made me see that motherfuckers don't care as long as it only fits their narrative. Not that it's the truth, that it's a narrative. So, um, this is really going to shock y'all about Minneapolis is because people think that our media doesn't protect others, doesn't protect people, but it does. And I'm starting to more get these connections and these because if you put a narrative out there, right, with the truth mixed in with the truth, people sometimes believe that narrative more than they believe they see that truth because it's more of sensationalism, right? It's more of a sensationalist, right? So I right, and that's what's crazy is that I really want to point on that is because I think even I'm starting to believe that our media is doing the same thing. These independent, some of these nonprofit that say this is my thing. You can't be independent and nonprofit at the same time. You can't. You can't. You can't be a nonprofit and independent at the same time. I want to know how. How? Because for you to survive, there's stipulations to those grants you're taking as a nonprofit. So how are you independent? How are you independent, right? How are you independent if you're a nonprofit and you can't speak on certain things because it goes at your boss? It goes at your, today's Andy Luger's last day. Can't stand that bitch ass motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's crazy because everybody wants to point out that we've had years of gang violence, but they never want to talk about the fact that we have all this other shit. Even this morning before I got on here, I was going through the what was passed last year was the African American Family Preservation Act. And there was a report that came out years ago that Ruth and Jeff Hayden, and that's what makes me wonder because why do they switch words? Because I want to know what made it from when y'all did this way back in the day and it never passed, and it was self-identification, but now that's what y'all do. It wasn't in there. It wasn't added. It wasn't in there, but now y'all added it to that bill. And it makes me wonder, like, who along the way 10 years ago that y'all was doing this, because our governor was Mark Dayton. This report came out when Dayton was governor. And it's the same names. They did a press conference. I'm going to show y'all. You think I'm lying, man? These people, that's the crazy thing. Actually, you know what? After this, I'm going to show y'all because I got to set it up. But what I want to talk about is generations of gang violence. And here's the thing of it is, they point to one shooting, but really, is it just that one shooting that keeps it going on for generations? Or is it the players are still out here and they know? They know. You know what I'm saying? They know. They know. They know who to hit, who the players are, and yet people still go for it. So I want you to watch this and just see that Fox 9, and I emailed Fox 9 too, because there's a whole lot more that they're not saying. You want to talk about the highs and the lows, but you really are not getting into all these nonprofit leaders that are, we push for peace, 21 days of peace, a Mother's Love Initiative, UMCT, there's black churches, Mad Dads, CEO, Touch. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to have these conversations, and we need to, because the same way that most of these nonprofits are ran the same exact way that we ran gangs, that we run gangs over North, that we run gangs all over America. It's that same structure. The same thing with a Ponzi scheme, with a pyramid scheme, it's all done by structure because it always protects the person that's up top. And people will never understand that.
Tonight, police and federal prosecutors bringing a fresh approach to cracking down on violent gangs.
The U.S. Attorney's Office turning to racketeering laws, once used to take down the mafia, and now trying to dismantle Minneapolis street gangs. They say these gangs are responsible for a generation of murder, retaliation, and drug trafficking.
Tonight, Paul Bloom talks with prosecutors, investigators, and victims about this new approach to an old problem.
And those interviews, along with a review of court records, helped us trace a generation of gang violence back to one specific incident, a deadly shooting 20 years ago. What do you remember about that case?
All we knew was some kind of house party that kind of went wild.
Veteran homicide investigators Charlie Adams and Richard Zimmerman responded to the scene at 12th and Knox in Minneapolis, May 2004.
As I recall, it was some groups from another gang that showed up at the party. And of course, then they had their interaction, and that's what sparked it.
Charging documents at the time detail a toxic mix of gang members at the large house party when gunfire erupted, creating chaos throughout the neighborhood.
10 seconds later, somebody pulled out a gun and started shooting.
18-year-old gang member Christopher Little was killed, igniting a gang war now decades long. The highs and the lows, often separated by just a single street, West Broadway in North Minneapolis. A battle over the same territory.
He's got 9 lives, man, you know.
Involving some of these same faces.
Ashimiyu Owanle.
Now under federal indictment.
He's been around. He's been a target at least 3 or 4 times on some of our cases where people end up dying.
All it takes is an attitude, anger, and access to a weapon. And before you know it, it's on. With one shot that can reverberate back and forth forever.
For years,
community leaders look for peace after a night of partying ends with bullets flying.
We have witnessed the resulting violence.
We need to send a call out to our community. And we want you to stop this madness of spilling each other's blood.
Gun violence and gang activity in our community deserves all hands on deck.
But now, for the first time, state investigators as well as federal prosecutors are pinpointing exactly when it started and how far it is spreading.
In any gang war and in the development of any gang, there are certain incidents that trigger both the conflict and the growth of the organization, and that's one of them.
That's not uncommon, that some of these feuds become simmering and generational in nature, and we need to end that.
In these federal court records in 2023, investigators say the feud between the highs and the lows started after Little, who was a member of the Lows, was killed. Quote, since this murder, there have been hundreds of shootings and murders between these two entities, adding that the victims of the ongoing violence include gang members, as well as, quote, innocent adults and children who have had nothing to do with street gangs.
And then she didn't come home.
Including Carmaine Tietzel's daughter.
I don't know.
Vanessa Jensen, Anaya Allen, Trinity Ray Smith.
Autumn Merrick was struck and killed while riding a scooter near Target Field, October 2021.
My daughter just turned 18, like her life was just beginning.
The shining star of her family, Autumn, was caught in the middle of a car chase and rolling shootout involving feuding gang members, including a man connected to the deadly house party shooting back in 2004. Lavelle Elmore was convicted of first-degree riot after police say he opened fire on Knox Avenue, triggering a generation of gang violence. Now, nearly 2 decades later, Elmore admitted he was behind the wheel of one of the vehicles, the Dodge Durango, that struck and killed Autumn Merrick.
They've been in and out of jail doing the same thing. Like, I don't get it. You are 30-something years old. You don't get, you haven't changed? Like, I don't get it.
What's going to make a difference? Which piece of this carnage can we take federally?
The violence forced outgoing U.S. Attorney Andrew Luger to treat gangs, the highs, the lows, and the bloods, as criminal enterprises.
The charges we announced today against the Lows allege a pattern of unthinkable and reprehensible violence.
charging dozens of alleged members with federal racketeering, also known as the RICO law, used to dismantle the mafia.
So if 4 people are involved in 3 murders and they do it on behalf of the gang, that's the basis for a RICO, and that's what we've done over and over and over again.
An organization of violence that started with a shootout 20 years ago.
There was something that night, that mixture of people, is that just kind of an ignition point?
No, that's exactly right. And there are really 2 types of trigger points for these. Like you said, a major gang leader is killed, there's retaliation, a war builds over that. The other is just the circumstances, who was there, how they reacted, and what they chose to do after that.
With the U.S. Attorney's Office in transition as a new administration is set to arrive in Washington, Andy Lugar is confident that these RICO cases will continue in federal court. So far, his team has charged nearly 100 alleged gang members. Paul Bloom, Fox 9.
The hardest thing is obviously finding product.
No, and we need to do more. But honestly, if you're not believing people that were part of that life and that were part of that scene, we're never going to change anything, because you're allowing these nonprofits that say they have changed their life, that used to be gang leaders like Sharif Willis. I'll say these niggas' names: Jerry McAfee, Keith Ellison. You know, we could talk about, there's so many things, because Bob Kroll, you know, that's the whole crazy thing about it, because I want to show you something, right? So this is about Target in Minneapolis. But I talk about Jewel. So Jewel is AI. But see, on here, they didn't know that, or they did know that, or they were naive, or they were playing a game. But it's just not critics from the left. The conservative Twin Cities satirist, Jewel Adora, best known for his, it's not a he, conspiracy theories and for mocking social justice issues, blogged about Target's influence over U.S. newsrooms. For decades, Target and Dayton's family have been the largest purchaser of newspaper advertising in nearly every city they operate. Target has bought 4 Color ink by the barrel, said Adora, which claimed has made them a darling of editorial billboards. In 2006, a business consultant working with the multinational retailer implanted a story in the Washington Post about Target's new surveillance and policing partnership, which was revealed in Unicorn Riot's short film, Unscathed, How the Press Helps Hide Target's Harm. This is also when Target first publicly disclosed its funding for the county attorney's office to lock up repeat offenders in downtown Minneapolis, where its headquarters are located. There were huge strings attached when we received the funding for our new staff. In the past, the DA's office tracked how many criminals were charged, though once we were working with Target, we were required to track how many convictions we get in a year, which exploded by 30-fold. Then Hennepin County Attorney Amy Klobuchar told the Post. According to the article, police can patrol neighborhoods by remote control, thanks to its surveillance partnership with Target. Target used the Post to announce it was funding the Minneapolis police and the Hennepin County's attorney's office without the voices of Minneapolis residents, activists, or scholars to push back. The Washington Post never disclosed the author's professional relationship with the multinational retailer. Within days, the Star Tribune ran the same story, also failing to mention that the author's employment with Target. You know, and that's the whole crazy thing, because that's the one, Nico, who's a reporter, whatever, for Unicorn Riot, didn't know that Jewel Adora was not real. It's not a real person. It's maybe the thoughts, you know, the interactions you were having in the history was real, but that person you were talking to, no, it was a computer that was set up. And I got pictures of what Jewel actually looked like, and it was a computer with antennas. It had some antennas on it with some little box. I'm not that I'm not technical savvy. I'm not none of that. But I understand is that this shit all leads to something bigger. Something bigger, because here's the thing of it is, if Jewel was pointing out the fact, they want to call it that she was doing a conspiracy theorist or whatever. She had sources. She came with sources. You know, that's big financial fraud. Nobody wants to talk about these things in Minneapolis because they benefit from it. And that's what's crazy to me, is because they talked about Jewel Adora. If you go on her website, I don't even know why I said her, but it was after it was named after a woman. And I got the story because Jewel Adora is actually a town in Iowa. And it was really wild because when we were coming back from Las Vegas, I was driving through on 35 in Iowa. Or maybe, I think it was 35. And I look up, I was like, wait, did that just say Jewel Adora? So I Googled it, you know what I'm saying? Did my little thing. And I reached out to Jewel and I said, hey, why is there a city in Iowa named after you? And I really should have thought differently then, because I mean, how many people have a whole city named after them or what? I mean, I shouldn't say after them, but they're named after a city. Some little buckhead ass city in the middle of the nowhere. You know what I'm saying? I should have probably got it then and there, but I really didn't connect 2 and 2. And it made it even more crazier because, okay, so I know y'all ain't gonna believe me, but maybe you will. Because so I'm gonna put it in here. I'm gonna put Jewel Adora, right? There is a town in Iowa named Jewel Adora. Oh, wait, let me put Iowa. So you guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah, exit 1A along 135. Okay, so my computer acting weird. Let's see. Here it is right here. Jewel Adora, Interstate 35, exit. Think of the exit. I don't even know what the exit is, but this is it right here. This is the town of Jewel Adora and what she's named after. The parish, it's in somewhere I didn't even understand the whole thing. I don't know. All this is fucking confusing to me. And to be honest, man, some of this shit freaks me out, right? Because it's like I feel like I was a part of some fucking science experiment. So I mean, it's not like I don't know what to feel. I don't even know, because it's hard to talk to people about it because they don't get it. Yeah, okay, so there's 2 towns, right, with the Jewel and the Door at the same exit, right? But it's in Iowa. So it's really crazy. And it makes me wonder, like, how many people really don't do their homework? You know what I'm saying? It's like, why aren't people doing their homework? Because you don't even know that. Maybe you do know, maybe it's satirist or whatever you want to call it, that you call Jewel a man, right? Maybe it's a error, you know, spell check, whatever. But it's really crazy to me how you didn't know that this was AI. And I'm somebody that I'm going to talk about this next. You know, it's about solitary confinement, you know, and I don't think a lot of people fully understand what that does to a person. Right. Okay, so it is different. But I did see the shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy as hell because yeah, I don't know. It was like we were in Iowa. It was early in the morning, and I saw the shit, and I'm like, wait, what? I was like, that's crazy as hell. But I want to show about solitary confinement. And we need to actually look at this, right? So I got something that I want to read. And when it came to, talking about solitary confinement, because to me it's different, right? And it's not easy, always something to talk about, right? So I want to talk about the whole solitary confinement and its impact. Let's start with the reality of solitary confinement, the whole, as it's called on the inside. Studies have shown that more than 14 days in solitary is considered torture. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. Torture. Prolonged isolation doesn't rehabilitate anyone. It only breaks people down, destroys mental health, and leaves scars that don't heal. Now imagine not 14 days, but 6 months. That was my reality in the Minnesota Department of Corrections at Oak Park Heights. I had a one single cell for half that time and no mattress. Think about that. No mattress. The only items I was allowed to have were a roll of toilet paper, a Bible, and a tiny toothbrush. That's where I met Yusha, who some people like to call Jesus. And trust me, when you're in the hole, he's only about the one who shows up for you. The conditions, they weren't just rough, they were inhumane. But here's the kicker. Does putting people in the hole actually stop crime? Does it make our streets safer? Absolutely not. Solitary confinement is a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, a lazy solution to deeper systemic problems. If anything, it's making things worse. The system isn't designed to rehabilitate. It's designed to punish and profit. And while the suits in power claim they're working to fix things, the reality on the ground tells a different story. And I really wanted to get into that about, solitary confinement and the whole, because, there is an effect on people that maybe we don't understand and we don't want to, we want to show that empathy. We want to show that, hey, you know what? We're sorry, but are we really sorry? Because look at the things that we pass. That's one thing that yesterday was a special election primary, and only 11% of that district voted. That was registered voters. Only 11%. So how are you, how are people speaking for us? Because the Republican, that's what's crazy. There was two candidates. There was Abigail Walters and some other person, right? But Abigail got 123 votes, and the other person only got 59. How are we going to ever win with that? How? That's not turning anything red. Because how many voters were Republican that came out and expressed how they felt? Niggas was more worried about the Democrats not showing up yesterday to the legislative session. And yet y'all are out here voting for one. Another Democrat, I know that's the Senate, to come in there and do what? Because without that House, you can't do anything, because that's where everything starts. Any bill, for it to get passed, has to come through the House. Has to come. I haven't read so much of Blacks. I know there's a whole, this was the whole thing that's confusing, right? Because there's another book, and then I believe it's called Morton's. It's what they use at legislative sessions. It's all their rules. And it is so confusing sometimes, because you see these legislative officials come out here, these no matter if they're Democrat or Republican, and they throw words at you, They just throw them, but they never explain what they mean, because they always use these articulate. That's what I want to call them. I call them articulate words, instead of just using words that people can get, that people can feel. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of shit that's crazy to me, man, and I don't understand it. Because I want to say one thing, right? And let me go find the video real quick, because that's the one thing, is that people honestly have to see it to believe it with your own eyes, right? It's not no more of, oh, we just got to hear about it. So if people don't remember, in Minnesota, there was just a couple weeks ago, there was a case where a woman was sentenced in St. Cloud, Minnesota, right, for working with El Chapo's cartel. And then not only that, we had somewhere that was locked in the basement, was handcuffed and getting beat by 3 individuals that were arrested, that was connected with the cartel. And I want to get into that. So let me play that, and then I'm going to be right back to talk, because people always want to say, oh, it's not possible. It's not possible. Yes, it is possible. You have, man, you open your mind, open your eyes.
SWAT team swarmed this St. Paul shop to save a man chained and beaten in the basement. Charges say that victim owed a debt to a Mexican drug cartel. That seems strange, since we're more than 1,000 miles away from the southern border.
You may be surprised to learn it's not the only recent cartel-connected crime in the Twin Cities. Frankie McLister talked to a former CIA agent and the loved one of a woman from Minnesota caught up in the cartel world. All knew it.
Obviously, she messed up, but she does not deserve to sit that much time.
Friends and family of Michaela Knott, or Kayla, say she's not what you think.
I understand there's consequences for our actions, but I have seen people's lives be transformed.
This after Knott was sentenced to more than 26 years in prison, pleading guilty to distributing nearly $10 million worth of drugs from Mexico to the upper Midwest. Knott moved south of the border in March 2020 after being laid off. Her loved one said Knott tried to come back, but didn't have a passport to do so.
I think it got really dark really fast, went downhill very quickly, and she was stuck in a situation that she couldn't get out of.
Former CIA agent Jack Rice says exactly how this can happen.
Imagine what happens when somebody says, how would you like $100,000? Look how easy this will be. It's a couple of hours work. It's nothing.
Knott's sentencing happened just days before 3 were charged in a cartel-related kidnapping in St. Paul.
They are much more difficult to actually control than small organizations that are located throughout the Twin Cities or elsewhere. These are powerful, multinational operations with huge resources.
And Rice says they have one goal.
Cartel is
Power.
here to make money.
Money, right?
The cartel is here for profit.
In St. Cloud, Frankie.
That's what I don't understand, right? Is political corruption is legal. It's legal, and why? That's the one thing, is because the person that was, we had a conversation kind of this morning back and forth through messaging, and he said that GOP fraud committee wasn't going to be able to really do anything. I said, yes, if it's because the way that I brought it, it's a bipartisan, right? Because to get anything done, it's got to be political. It can't be just not political. It has to be political. But it has to be from both parties. It's got to be bipartisan, or it doesn't work. So that's the way that it's even with artificial intelligence. You know what I'm saying? You can't have one party domination, because at the end of the day, it doesn't look at the other individuals. So if Republicans run it, then they can do it. But they're only going to do it after Democrats. They're not going to come after all the people that were nasty, were dirty, with Anton Lazaro, and never gave their money back. And there's a lot of them. There's Elliot Ingen. There's questions, and it's not about somebody's criminal background. It's like, how can you call yourself a person of Jesus if you have a promiscuous history and yet you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about it, but then you want to block people. You want to call them all kind of names. I'm not afraid of what's on paper about me because I'll talk about it. I want to explain it. On paper, I read that people were being promiscuous in the lab while they were a part of our legislature, that they were having affairs. Just like I found out about Marty Kelly's brother and Red Wing Tim Kelly. Why he wasn't a state legislator anymore, because he had to retire. He had to quit. He had to resign because of the simple fact that he was caught in an affair with another state legislator while they were on a trip, and they got pulled over by a park ranger and lied about it. That's the only reason. It's not because they wanted to do the right thing. No, because at first they denied it, just like the same thing with Nicole Mitchell. You're seeing benefits to a system that everyday citizens don't get. You know, that's the one thing, even in Rochester, you know, there's a situation right now where a person was arrested for a fire, being responsible, but that's not what they say. They have evidence. Well, then why doesn't your report say what that evidence is? Are you just hiding it? Because for what that is all in that what happened in the fire, but then yet the person is out with just released on their own recognizance. How can you not expect people in the community to be mad when they read a story and they see all those things, and then you're saying it was set intentional? Because when it first came out, it wasn't. It was a tragic accident. And now you totally switched and said that it wasn't an accident. He did it intentionally, but yet you're not showing what was intentional. So, and it's crazy to me, and that's what this system does. They come out with little narrative parts instead of the truth, little white lies to get people chaotic, right? To get people chaotic. And it's crazy to me because we fall for it all the time. We fall for it all the time. We fall for it. And I don't understand it. Because even what's going on I don't understand, you know, that's the crazy part is how can people say that you care about, maybe you don't care though. You know, you say you care about people, but yet, you know, we have people living like this. I don't know, I want to play that or not. You know what? Before I go to that, I want to play what's going out because I think it interacts with what I'm about to talk about. And that's with all these natural disasters, right? And if you looked at it, there's a lot of property that was already bought by a company by the name of BlackRock. And it was Vanguard. And I want people to look at this and get your own perception of it. But I also want you to be a critical thinker about it. I don't want you to be somebody that is, oh, well, this is a lie. These people are weird. No, be a thinker about it. Be critical, because why are these things happening? Why are these things happening? So here's I think it's about 3 minutes long. And it tells about is BlackRock taking over Pasadena, California, the end of an American dream. And I want you to watch this, and please put your thoughts in the comments or anything that you want to ask or anything about that, and I'll answer them. So with that being said, man, listen to is BlackRock taking over.
This video on the impact of institutional investors like BlackRock, Vanguard, and Invesco on the residential real estate market and how it creates hardship for individual homebuyers to compete. The recent trend of institutional investors buying up large amounts of real estate, particularly in the residential market, has raised concerns about the impact on the affordability and accessibility of housing for individual home buyers. In this video, we will dive deeper into the reasons behind the phenomenon, the implications it has on the housing market, and potential solutions to address the issue. Institutional investors like BlackRock, Vanguard, and Invesco are attracted to the residential real estate market for several reasons. One, the current low interest rate environment and strong economy have made it easier for them to borrow money and invest in real estate. Additionally, residential real estate is considered a relatively stable and reliable source of income, making it an attractive investment option. And furthermore, the current global market conditions with the pandemic have led to an increase of people searching for their own homes, hence creating a high demand for housing. The trend of institutional investors buying large amounts of residential real estate has a significant impact on individual home buyers. With a limited supply of homes and increased competition from institutional investors, home prices can rise, making it harder for individual buyers to afford a home. Furthermore, institutional investors often have more financial resources at their disposal, which allows them to make cash offers outbidding individual buyers and further limiting their options. The impact of institutional investors on the residential real estate market is not limited to individual home buyers. It also has a significant impact on the housing market as a whole. The influx of institutional investors buying up properties can lead to a lack of inventory for individual buyers, which can further drive up prices. Additionally, when institutional investors buy properties and rent them out, it can lead to a decrease in home ownership and an increase in the rental market. This could lead to a decrease of affordable rental options for low-income renters and an increase of gentrification in certain neighborhoods. There are several potential solutions to address the impact of institutional investors on the residential real estate market. One solution is to increase funding for affordable housing developments, which will provide more options for low-income residents. Another solution is to implement policies that limits the amount of properties that institutional investors can buy, which would help to level the playing field for individual buyers. Additionally, the government could also consider implementing policies that promote community land trusts or cooperative housing, which would provide more affordable homeownership options for low-income residents and increase community control over housing. If you're thinking about buying a property and want to know if these institutional investors have impacted your marketplace, feel free to reach out to the Kevin Kwan Real Estate Group. We will be more than happy.
Man, so it's crazy, but I want to get into, and it's the same thing. So if you see what's going on out there in California with all these fires, and how isn't companies, corporations buying up properties to make them more money and make them, what, Biden offered them $770 per person down there in California for these, I call them, and I'm going to keep on calling them because that's what I've been seeing, because how can blue houses not catch on fire, right? And we've seen it, every house that has not caught on fire, you see neighborhoods demolished, but not the blue houses. So again, weapons, DUs, direct energy weaponry, doesn't talk. And this is what's crazy is, so I'll get into it more and I'll show you, because it's something to do with the blue. And I'm not understanding, because maybe it doesn't see it. I don't know, but it's really wild. But I want to show you this, is that ahead of the Super Bowl, they're putting people in these homeless camps. So we all heard about these camps, right? And I know that New Orleans did this last, it's 2025 now, but in 2024, when Taylor Swift went down there, they were doing camps, right, for the homeless. So they announced it before the Super Bowl. And it's crazy to me is because how are not these concentration camps?
Officials scrambled to erect a temporary center for homeless people ahead of the Super Bowl and Mardi Gras at the direction of Governor Landry.
Chris Joseph reports the shelter divides residents and leaders.
Monday afternoon, crews worked to get what the state calls the transitional center off the ground. We weren't allowed in. but from the outside, it's a 70,000 square foot Port Nola warehouse. The state says the 200-bed facility will be caring for the homeless community by this Wednesday.
We will give them opportunity to have food. They will have shower facilities, medical facilities, as well as mental health counseling.
They'll also be on France Road, an 11-minute drive from the Superdome and a nearby encampment. A sign at the encampment explains the benefits of the center and promised transportation to the facility. But it also warned law enforcement could get involved if people don't leave. One resident who anonymous says he'll leave, but he's not going to the center. What's your plan?
No, I'm not trying to go, no. I think it's going to be just way too many people, and it's going to turn into just a disaster.
Local leaders are divided on the plan. Representative Alonzo Knox released a statement in support, saying the current encampments are unsafe and pose risks to public health. Meanwhile, City Council member Leslie Harris provided Fox 8 a document from the Workforce Group, which will help run the center. It shows that if the center operates for 90 days, it will cost an estimated $16 million.
God damn!
She says the city asked the state for $8 million to address the homelessness issue after the Taylor Swift concert.
We could have had people housed and in shelter already.
Governor Jeff Landry's office told Fox 8 that document was not the final proposal, but did not provide any other figures. Back on France Road, those who live and work at the nearby dock say they were blindsided by the news.
I'm glad that they're giving people a place to stay for sure. It's a little interesting that it's right next to where I live, though.
Right.
We're going to have to increase security. We're going to have to be more vigilant on who's in and out of the yard. We got to take care of our customers.
The state plans to move in the new neighbors this week.
That's crazy.
Now, the sign at the encampment promised 24/7 security at the facility. The state told Fox 8 again, the center is temporary.
Wow.
All right, Chris, thank you.
It's always
Governor
temporary,
Landry
though. It's
also
never.
announced-
That's the one thing. Look, I'm going to leave this up here for a minute because that's crazy. And you know, I used to. My grandson, his anniversary is coming up next month, right? You all know I talk about Kingston, Kai, a lot, right? Cal, that's what I called him. And I didn't have a great relationship, and I still don't with his mother, right? We have problems. I'm a father, you know. I will say this is that I'm a work in progress, and my life is. I'm open about everything that I've ever done, anything, everything, because I look at things in my life as a learning curve, a learning to get where I am today. I had to learn. So if you don't learn from your mistakes and you don't take them as lessons, no, I had to endure some crazy ass shit to get where I'm at today. And am I at the top? Not by society standards, but by my standards, I feel like I'm pretty much I'm damn near on top. You know, that's the crazy thing is because I got some big shit and coming up. I got some big things, you know, and I want to collaborate collectively with others. You know, me and Robert have been doing that recently. I've been getting into doing, you know, with Circumstantial Saint, with Corel Wrights, with Abstract Sam, you know, even reaching out to people in Ohio. There's another DJ that I've had some conversations with. They have an online radio. It's not the one in Ohio. They're in New York. But I want to do something collaboratively. I want to do something where that's never been done before. It's a 24-hour, go get your news. We support starving artists. You know, when we do events, I don't want to charge 30, 40 bucks for people to come in and to not feel like when they leave, they don't leave educated. They don't leave better than what they came in. That's the kind of product that I want to give. That's the kind of product that I believe that the people that it's all about education. It's all about how, when we know better, we do better. That's what it's about to me. And that consciousness revolutionary, I take that to the heart, man. I definitely take that to the heart. And I want to show, so the Supreme Court right now, you see Winkler, they're at the Supreme Court. I guess they were. They ain't live no more. They are live. But this is at the Supreme Court in Minnesota. I don't know. This should be acting weird.
Be cast, and I haven't heard any suggestion from you that would help us to address that. What do we do with those?
Well, those voids are cast for an unlawful election, and so those votes would be invalidated. Again, there's a special election happening right now in Senate District 60. Nobody has been able to cast votes for that because the primary just happened last night. And so, again, respondents could have waited to open the absentee ballot period for the special general election until later. They chose not to.
Counsel, back to Justice Moore's point and sort of on the practical bigger picture, I think that your argument would have not more merit because it has merit, but I'm saying like sort of more gusto to it if there was ultimately not going to be a special election. But I think everybody, as Justice Moore indicates, agrees that that is going to happen. And so, I mean, where is the balancing? I understand, yes, we have the statutes and the laws and the way that things are supposed to go, but then we also do have voters who are trying to figure out what on earth we're all doing and when do they vote and when do they not vote. So where's the balancing?
And I certainly understand that at some point there will be a special election to fill this vacancy. It's a question of when, and it's a question under what authority. There are laws, there are statutes that prescribe when these things happen, not when they ought to happen. And again, going back to the Loring case, 1870, a gentleman was elected in November, passed away before he could take the next office. May have made sense to have a special election. They went and held an election. That election was found invalid, and all those votes cast were disregarded. So better to stop votes for an invalid election now than continuing to accrue them. And again, the legislature added subdivision 8 to what is now 35102, which says that when someone dies, a non-incumbent, between this period, like in the Loring case, now that creates a vacancy, and that vacancy then through operation of the other statutes.
Counsel, if we disagree with your subdivision 4, 204D19 subdivision 4 argument, what provision would apply here? Would it be subdivision 2 of that same statute? What's your view of sort of how the statutes would dictate the timing of the writ?
Correct, Your Honor. Yes, subdivision 2 would be the operative statute at that point. Which again requires there to be a vacancy. So we then go look at the vacancy statutes. 351.
So what would the timing be under subdivision 2?
Well, they would have to call it within 35 days. They would have to issue the writ within 5 days of a vacancy happening.
And would that vacancy have occurred yesterday? When would the vacancy have occurred under subdivision 2 in your view?
Well, under our view, it occurred yesterday when the House passed a resolution. There's an alternate view that it happened on the first day of the term, which would have been January 6th. We don't argue that, but that could be argued. It could also be argued that it's happened on the first day of session. But what it didn't happen was there was no vacancy on the 27th when, and it can't be called a resignation, whatever it is that Mr. Johnson tendered, he can't resign from something he had not yet possessed, that nothing in law allows a vacancy to exist at that point.
Counsel, it seems to me one of the governor's strongest arguments is under 351.055, preparation for special elections. And you make the point in your briefing that that statute says nothing about the power to issue a writ, and you're right, it's completely silent with that in that respect. But by the same token, isn't it also true that a writ is the only way to have a special election? I mean, you can't have that one without the other.
Correct, Your Honor, but everywhere the legislature has wanted to give the power to the governor to be able to issue a writ, it's explicitly done so and expressly done so. All through 204D, there are multiple instances of where a writ can be called when there is a vacancy. And so to find a undefined power under 351.055, something that was characterized as a housekeeping bill at the time, that would broadly expand the power of the governor to determine when he deems that there is a vacancy such that could be filled at some future date.
Just as a side note, where is it characterized as a housekeeping bill? Where would I find that?
I believe we cited that in our brief. It was referred to in one of the House, one of the reports at the time.
Okay.
Boy, Winkler on my ass, man.
Oh, go ahead. One last question, Justice Easton, on that is, it says that if a future vacancy becomes certain to occur and the vacancy must be filled by a special election, again, the only way you do that is by writ, right? The appropriate authorities may begin procedures leading to the special election so that a successor, Why isn't the governor an appropriate authority to begin whatever procedures that need to be done? I mean, respondents say there are a whole host of procedures. You got to find polling places, you got to do a whole host of things. But why isn't the governor one of those people?
Well, again, if the legislature wanted to, and it has spoken specifically on writs, it would have said so. And so again, to create a broad power to fill an anticipatory vacancy, and it goes back to what this court has said, which is that when there's an anticipatory vacancy, it has to be expressed by statute. This is, there's nothing in here that's express about being able to issue.
So if someone were, like in February, say, resign. Right. So an incumbent resigns, but says, on February 1st, they send a letter saying I'm going to resign on March 1st. Could a writ issue before March 1st? Would that be a circumstance when the preparation would allow the writ to issue before March 1st to set the special election? Because the person there is a provision in the vacancy that addresses that kind of, how would that work?
That example is the power would not come from 351.055. 351.01 defines that kind of vacancy. It allows people to resign at some future date. It's very prescribed. The general rule is that future.
Right, but the resignation wouldn't actually happen until March 1st. Could the governor could the governor under subdivision 2 then issue the writ before March 1st as an anticipatory under 351.055?
Well, that issue isn't here
of course.
Now. I think there are arguments.
I'm just trying to understand what this what 055 would ever cover. And I get you say, well, you can start to kind of think about what the ballot should look like and all that.
You can find ballot, you can find polling locations, you can find, all the other work that can be done. You can get staffing ready to go.
But it would not necessarily exclude a writ in that. Well, maybe we don't have to reach that issue, but that's a possibility, right?
I don't think in any scenario does 351.055 include the issuance of it. And
so under the circumstances here, and sticking with 351.055, given the circumstances here, was there a future vacancy that was certain to occur at the time the writ was issued?
No, there was not.
Why not?
The only future vacancies that could be created are as a result of 351.01, 351.02, and the legislature carefully prescribes that an incumbent may resign at some future date. It must tend to the resignation to the appropriate authority that's responsible for calling a special election. It must be irrevocable, and if they are going to revoke it, it must be revoked by certain. There's a whole regulatory scheme around when someone wants to resign to bind them to that resignation. There's no such regulation for a non-incumbent to be able to.
Although, Mr. Wilson, what about, I'm looking at 351.01 subdivision 3B. A resignation may be made expressly to take effect at a stated future date. Now, I get your argument that you can't resign from a position you didn't hold, but kind of putting that aside, so maybe it's not a resignation, and maybe that resolves it right there. I don't know. But it does give the idea or suggest that the letter that Mr. Johnson wrote had some effect. I mean, you say it was a nullity, but he was at least expressing that there was going to be a vacancy at some future date.
We don't believe that statute or 351.01 would have bound Mr. Johnson and kept him from showing up on the first day of session yesterday. And so there is no, maybe there ought to be. There are policies to weigh on both sides of that. But just like in Loring, there wasn't a statute at the time that let when someone passed away being able to fill that vacancy, and there isn't one here.
If that's the case, why did his certificate of vacancy not be presented yesterday?
I guess that would be a choice. I can't speak for the Secretary of State, the clerk, and Mr. Johnson on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Your time has expired. Mr. Dickey.
Was the governor the right person to present this notice of resignation, or should it have gone to the House? I mean, if it's valid, I mean, who's the actual authority here? Is it the governor, or is it? I mean, the House gets to decide whether they're going to seat Mr. Johnson. Should it have been presented to the Speaker?
I don't think Mr. Johnson could resign because.
Well, I understand that, but assuming he could, who should have gotten it?
As I recall, and I don't have the statute in front of me right now, but I think the appropriate authority to accept a resignation, an actual resignation, would be the governor. Under the Constitution, the governor fills a vacancy. So if the governor calls the election to fill the vacancy. So in that case, then I think the governor would be the right person to receive it if it were valid. But of course, because there was no office being held at the time, then it couldn't be valid under, again, 150 years of this court's precedent. I would like to yield to any other questions right away because I only have 4 minutes left, but otherwise I'll make a quick point about our client's particular interest in this matter. Minnesota Voters Alliance interest in this case is to ensure the election law is followed, whether that means a sooner election or a later election. People have faith in their elections when the rule of law is followed. And yesterday afternoon, when the House met and passed the resolution to accept the results in its very first act, and that act was then entered into the Journal of the House, because of that action, the vacancy does exist, and I agree with everything Mr. Wilson said to you up here earlier. And so MVA believes that the governor must act within 5 days now, because the governor's writ power issues or comes up when a vacancy exists and in no other time. So the governor now has a mandatory non-discretionary duty to issue that writ within 4 days of today. And if he does not do that, then in our view of the case, because that was a valid resolution, he'll have violated the law again. So we would urge the court to grant the petition in this case and note that now that a vacancy exists, the governor does need to move fast. And to go further to the impact of that on the court's decision, we don't think the court has to necessarily decide that issue, but it is going to be helpful to the governor to know exactly when he should be issuing the writ if the court decides in favor of the petition.
So the corollary to that would be if we disagree with you about the effect of the resolution from yesterday, then what?
Then 22 days from yesterday, the governor will have to issue the writ. So
that's the 5 or 22 that your co-counsel was talking about.
Exactly right, yes.
Did the beginning of the session moot out any argument that's being made under subdivision 4?
No, because so the way that subdivision 4 works as we see it is that the court order is binding and it is valid. If the House does not pass on the contest and issues no resolution, there's a default built into subdivision 4 that says 22 days after the first day of session, then the vacancy occurs. Bam, the writ can issue. If the House does what it did yesterday and says we're not going to pass on it, the House has exercised its prerogative to decide its election contest. It's not, you know, it's not. At that point, then yesterday, as we see it, that's when the vacancy began to exist. I would like to talk a little bit about the equity.
Wait, what was the resolution? Was it to accept the district court's decision, they didn't make a decision not to do anything. They made a decision that they're going to basically accept the district court's decision.
I believe it actually said that now a vacancy exists as a result of that. So I think practically speaking, whether the language was exact, it did what you're looking for. But the equities of the situation, I would just note that whereas in a general election with a November ballot, statewide elections, every case that the respondents have cited related to latches all relate to those large statewide elections. The one special election, I think, is the Troyan case. And in that case, it was still statewide. It was a U.S. Senator primary election. So you had 2 million ballots that were going to be cast. We acknowledge and respect the fact that there can be confusion caused by having new elections to be held. But this court in Jacobs versus Columbia Heights just last year did 4 days before an election cancel a recall election. And we think that the people of this state are perfectly capable of understanding that, hey, something happened that went awry. There's going to be a new election held. And in fact, as Mr. Wilson pointed out, there will be probably additional candidates depending on what decisions they make as to filing, including Mr. Shen, who submitted an affidavit in this case.
But counsel, didn't we say in Martin that in bringing this kind of petition, you have to judge carefully whether you can afford to wait even a few days before acting upon your known right?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did, Your Honor. And I would just note on that point, I think the Martin case might have been a 2-week delay, but the court still, I think if I'm thinking of that there's a bunch of Martin decisions, I guess, but the one in St. Louis County is what I'm thinking of. There's a 2-week delay between the time of when the awareness of the right to potentially bring a claim and then actually filing. In this case, there's 8 days, 4 business days over the Christmas and New Year's holiday working as quickly as possible to get this case filed.
Counsel, candidate Shen or prospective candidate Shen could have filed an affidavit of candidacy under the provisions for an absent candidate out of the state, couldn't he?
I'm not aware, Your Honor. I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Or by facsimile, aren't there other alternatives for candidates who may not be in the jurisdiction at the time of the filing period?
I don't recall, Your Honor, but I believe that the statute requires that they have to register at the county auditor's office or at the Secretary of State, and I'm not 100% sure what the process would have been for that.
And I can inquire with Mr. Hartshorn about that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Look at white people. Shouldn't sound racist. I shouldn't say that. Who's up here now? Let's hear him. Who's this?
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Nathan Hartshorn. I'm an Assistant Attorney General, and I'm here representing the state respondents in this matter, who are Governor Tim Walz and Secretary of State Steve Simon. On December 27th of 2024, Curtis Johnson was the duly certified representative-elect for House District 40B in Ramsey County. He had a properly issued certificate of election and an indisputable right to present that certificate and take the oath of office at such time as the legislature convened in 2025. But that day, Mr. Johnson submitted a letter to Governor Walz in which he voluntarily forfeited his right to take office. As soon as he did that, it became inevitable that the office of representative from District 40B would become vacant under the operation of the state constitution when the state's official year began on Monday, January 6th. State law, section 351.055, gives the governor the authority to fill that vacancy, and Governor Walz did so later on December 27th for the purpose of filling the vacancy, quote, at the earliest possible time, unquote, which is what that statute requires. The governor set a schedule for the special election that met all of the restrictions that state law places on the writ and on the governor. All of this is both the command and the intention of state law on filling vacancies in office. Governor Walz acted as quickly as he could, as required by law, to ensure that the residents of District 40B are left without representation for as little time as possible. Everything the governor did was lawful. The representation of the residents of District 40B is at stake, and this court should uphold the writ. That's all I have for my opening, so I'm happy to take whatever questions the court may have.
Counsel, is abandonment a criteria under the statute that creates a vacancy in an office?
I mean, the statute in question, I think it would be the resignation statute that counsel has referenced. I don't see a reason why that statute needs to be read in such a way that this is not a resignation. They are hanging their hat on that argument on subdivision 1 there that says an incumbent may do such and such and such. But as the Chief Justice noted, subdivision 3B of that statute and also subdivision 4 are forward-looking, recognize the ability of the folks impacted by that statute to make decisions to do things with future effect. And given that future effect is part of that statute, I don't see any reason why the word incumbent can't be read recognizing future effect. That Curtis Johnson was in the future tense going to be an incumbent. And given that, in future effect, he was going to be an incumbent, he had, under subdivision 3B, the statutory right to resign. But if you don't
you would agree, he maybe was going to be an incumbent, but you're not disputing that he, in fact, was not one at the time he wrote that letter.
That's correct.
And I think that's your opponent's point, is that all the statutes talk about incumbents.
Well, that one, yes. And I just don't think that is a necessary meaning to put on the term incumbent in subdivision 1 there. But
along that same line, did he resign his position?
His letter did call what he was doing a resignation.
I heard you use the word forfeit, I think, today instead of resign.
Yes, we've used various terms in our briefing or whatever, because we don't think that it's particularly crucial whether 351.01 applies to what he did or not.
In looking at the rationale for the decision to issue the writ when it was issued, should we or can we look at the language that was used in the writ and that writ notes that there was a resignation?
The court certainly may do that, yes, and we would agree that yes, that should be considered a resignation under 351.01. However, that's not a crucial point.
Counsel, if we disagree with you that it is a resignation, what happens to your argument?
Not very much, because under any circumstances, whether he can formally do the thing that has the term resign. Nonetheless, he has, like anyone who has a right, he has the right to waive that right. He has the right to give up that right. He has the ability to say, hey, this thing that I have the right to do, to wit, on January 6th or thereafter, walk into the Minnesota House of Representatives and present this certificate of election. That right that I have, I hereby surrender that right. I hereby abandon that right.
But what provision of the statute, if let's say he just changed his mind and he shows up yesterday, then what?
Given the abandonment, well, he has a letter in which he has explicitly promised not to do that, and I mean that could certainly operate against him. But exactly, Justice McKay, I think that is the reason why we would want resignation, that term, to apply to him, because in subdivision 4 of 351.01, it is specifically, I mean, it is intended to block exactly that kind of change of mind, at least unless particular procedures are followed.
Counsel, the kind of related to that question, two concerns I have. If you're looking at 351.055, it says if a future vacancy becomes certain to occur, and I just wonder how certain it was to occur for two reasons. One, he sent his letter on December 27th, right? He still had time to appeal, because under the relevant statute, he had until, to appeal to this court, he had until December 30th to do that. So when the governor issued the writ, it wasn't, that doesn't sound certain to me necessarily.
That argument certainly can be made. However, Mr. Johnson did, I think, everything one could do in writing in that letter to give up any.
To say that he wasn't planning to do that.
Right, that he had decided not to appeal, and that he was giving up his right to the legislative seat with permanent effect. And he was.
I was just going to say on that point, the other reason it maybe isn't certain is that he still could have attempted to be seated. He still could have gone to the House and attempted to be seated. But what I hear you saying is he abandoned, or whatever word we want to use to that, he abandoned his rights to do either one of those, to either appeal or to be seated by the House, and so therefore it was certain.
Right. And it's very difficult, I think, to read his letter to be doing anything other than permanently abandoning. I mean, to the extent it is even possible for someone in his position on that day to write a letter that gives it up permanently, that makes it certain.
But what
gives him the power to do that?
I was just going to say, but what about their argument that you can't give up something you don't own?
But he did own the right. He did own a certificate of election. He did own the right to go to the Minnesota House of Representatives and present that. And
but he wasn't. What's his right to give up? Yeah. Well, I mean, why does he have the power to say this certificate of election is invalid? It doesn't seem like he had. I don't see anything in the statute that says the canvassing board issued a certificate of election. The district court made a decision, but you don't think that decision is meaningful in any way.
It's an advisory opinion, yes.
Right, and so the certificate of, and the district court actually, as I understand it now, actually didn't decide that the certificate of election was invalid.
That's right. Statutorily, it could not. 209 does not empower the court to do that.
So why does Curtis Johnson have the power to say that?
Well, because it's his certificate. He's not saying that his certificate is invalid. He is warranting.
Wasn't it presented?
He is representing that he's not going to use it.
Why wasn't it presented to the legislature? I think it was not presented to the legislature yesterday, right?
I'm not aware that it was, and my presumption is it wasn't. I think Mr. Dickey is correct that the letter was presented to the governor because the governor is the authority.
I'm not asking that. Why wasn't the certificate of election? What was his certificate? There was only 133 certificates of election presented yesterday. And
sounds right.
Was that Tabke's or was that Johnson's that wasn't presented?
I believe it was Johnson's.
And why was that?
Because I mean,
who made that decision?
Very practical answer to that question. I'm not sure.
Decision?
Excuse me.
Did the secretary make that decision?
I don't believe so.
Who?
I presume it wasn't presented because Mr. Johnson.
So it's actually the incumbent that comes to the election. I mean, under this comes and presents the certificate. The representative-elect.
I'm not sure how the actual logistics of that are done, but I believe the reason it wasn't
niggas ain't watching this, boy.
presented was because
This
Mr.
is
Johnson
crazy.
evinced as
They
clearly
trying
as
to
he could
cover up.
the intention not to do so. And the other thing is, I think there is still room to read incumbent in 35101 sub 1 in a forward-looking way, because subdivision 3B in that statute, in that section, also is read in a forward-looking way.
If I could just take us back to the statute, your argument seems to be almost entirely founded on 351.055, and I'm wondering why in this case, which concerns the timing of the governor's issuance of a writ, we are not looking at the statute that specifically addresses timing for the governor's issuance of a writ, and that, of course, would be 204D19. Why aren't we there, and why doesn't that statute control our decision here?
Well, I don't believe that 204D19 places an earlier limitation on the beginning of the period in which a writ can be issued. I'm looking at 204D19 sub 2, which Your Honor is referencing. The governor shall issue within 5 days after the vacancy occurs. But then 351.055 adds to that, adds an additional authority that the governor and other appropriate authorities have to carry out the procedures that prepare for elections. And counsel has said that is not a grant of authority to the governor, but I have a difficult time understanding how that can be true. It is certainly true that the governor is among the appropriate authorities. It is certainly true that a writ is a procedure leading to the special election. So by the plain and ordinary meaning of those phrases, that certainly appears to me to be a grant to the
in 204D19, the legislature advanced its ability to specifically reference the governor, and that reference is not made in the statute that you're relying on. And so I'm just struggling a little bit to understand why that would be if the 351.55 statute indeed applies to the circumstances here.
Sure. The legislature certainly does have the ability to refer to the governor specifically. I don't quite understand why the legislature would have the obligation to refer to the governor specifically. Council has referred to that obligation. I'm not sure what the source of that obligation would be. The appropriate authority. An appropriate authority includes the governor. Procedures leading to the special election include the governor. One other provision within 351.055 is that so that a successor may be elected at the earliest possible time. I would point out there is only one appropriate authority who has any ability to change the time at which that the elected person is going to be elected. Why would that directory language exist in 351.055 so that a successor may be elected at the earliest possible time? Whom is that directing, if not the governor? The local officials who are other appropriate authorities, they certainly can do other things procedurally after they get the dates and other information in the writ, but they have no impact on what time the election is going to take place. The governor does. So that a successor may be elected at the earliest possible time directly indicates that this is intended to apply to the governor. I did want to return to a...
Can I just follow up on that a little bit?
Sure.
It's a little bit different, but I just want to understand, if we decide that subdivision 4 applies, that this was a contested, successful election contest, and that specifically says when the writ has to be issued. I mean, it's very specific. Do you lose at that point? I mean, you can't really say 055 gives them the right to issue a writ different than what the specific statute says, right?
Well, I mean, I think you're left with a bit of a statutory conflict there, because we're in a situation then in which this writ was issued at a time in which our position is, and the House GOP yesterday just ratified this position, that as of December 27th, there was no successful election contest. And at that time, the governor, for the reasons we
ratified it,
I was going to say, I think they did just the opposite. They're saying that there was there was a successful election contest.
As I read the resolution that the House GOP passed yesterday, they are declaring that their resolution yesterday is a successful election contest that has created a vacancy. Our position is that a successful election contest cannot exist without legislative action. Now, we don't believe that what happened yesterday is such a thing for three external reasons.
Well, your argument there seems to belie the language of the statute a little bit. So looking at subdivision 4 seems to contemplate that the court's action is the sort of determinative action there by going on to further address, what the legislature can do with that. And so I'm a little concerned that your argument conflicts with the plain language of the statute. Help me out there.
Right. Well, I think there is a concern to be had there, but the concern to be had there is that the plain language in particular in that particular portion, the last 2/3 of the statute, it conflicts with this court's decision in Scheibel versus Pavlak from 1979. The suggestion that Your Honor is seeing in there, that there's a court determination that creates a vacancy, was specifically struck down, was specifically blocked by this court in Scheibel versus Pavlak, which held that court determinations in legislative contests can only be advisory. It is flatly impossible for a court determination to create a contest. But Your Honor, I think you're correct that if you go past, I think, the first 30 words of that subdivision, so basically the word unless to the end, I think it does contemplate a court determination that creates a vacancy. Now, this language was first put into Minnesota law in 1971, at the end of the 1971 legislative session. I can provide the court with the session law information for that if you'd like. But what had just happened at the beginning of the 1971 session was a huge mess at the opening of the Minnesota Senate. Those facts are recounted in the State Ex Rel. Palmer versus Perpich case that we cited a couple of times. At the end of that session, they passed the language that, after a couple of recodifications, ends up.
Counsel, let me stop you. I share the concerns that Justice Thiessen and Justice Gaius have just raised, and was about to ask it as well. But just tell me from a plain language standpoint, and I think that's what petitioners are relying on. Subdivision 4 says, if a vacancy results from a successful election contest, what else could that mean other than what Judge Castro did in Ramsey County? How is that not a successful election contest? I grant you that that isn't necessarily the end of the road, because the legislature has the constitutional authority to seat its own members.
Right.
But I don't know that that means it's not also true that Judge Castro's ruling was as far as Mr. Wickstrom was concerned, was a successful election contest. What else could that mean?
Well, I think the notion that a district court's determination of a contest or ruling in a contest makes it a successful election contest is an unavoidable conflict with Scheibel versus Pavlak.
Well, wait, can I just, so you're saying, so Pavlak was decided and then the legislature passed a statute?
No, the other way around. The statute was passed in 71 and Pavlak was decided in 79.
79. And so in Pavlak, you read that as basically saying, there we kind of danced around the issue a little bit because we did issue an order, although we said it's not binding. But I think the legislature also said in the statute, this is how we're going to think about this. And they, in some sense, conceded some authority back to the district court because they left the third option, which is we're not going to take any action at all. And it's going to, then 22 days after, the governor issues a writ. That means it becomes vacant at that point. Right. Why can't the legislature exercise its statutory authority in that way, which is not in conflict with Pavlak?
Well, I think in Scheibel versus Pavlak, this court held that the legislature's duty to hear contests is non-delegable. They can't act like this court does on a PFR and say, all right, we're going to reject this PFR, and therefore.
But they're not delegating it in the sense that, I mean, they are, I guess, but they're saying one action that we can take is inaction. Why is that not legitimate?
Well, I have a difficult time seeing how that is not just deciding not to exercise the power that this court held in Scheibel. They have to exercise. Just allowing a court decision to stand in that way.
So the statute's unconstitutional, basically.
Well, not in
that part.
Not in total.
That part of it is
yes,
unconstitutional.
the presumption that is underlying the text that Justice Gaitis read off. It presumes a situation that under Scheibel constitutionally can't happen.
And so can I just, okay, I get your argument. So can I just come back to my earlier question though?
Sure.
Assuming we set Pavlik aside, okay, just put that aside, and we think that subdivision 4 applies.
Okay.
What's your argument that 055 would overcome the specific timing in subdivision 4, or do you not have one?
Well, our argument is that there still has not been a successful election contest.
I understand. I'm obviously disagreeing with you over saying section 4, subdivision 4 applies, right? So assuming I disagree with you on that point, if we disagree with you on that point and say it applies, do you have any argument under 055?
I mean, the argument we then have is that we have a conflict of laws, that we have some statutes that say as of December 27th that the governor has the authority to do this. Because there was a vacancy on January 6th, not just on the opening of the legislature, you have that authority for the governor as of December 27th. So
even though,
and then here's this other statute.
But when resolving, so I think they can probably be harmonized, but assuming that is a conflict, why would the more specific statute not apply?
We are down a chain of a lot of.
They have to go down.
Yeah, it puts a governor in a position in which the statutes.
To put the governor in a position, they should just follow the law.
Right.
Well, sure, but as of December 27th. The authority that he had arrived by statute, and the potential for a successful election contest in the future.
But didn't Benedict just contradict what you're saying right now?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't understand what conflict.
Because they said that was not valid, and then the law was changed.
I'm sorry. That's the Winona case from 1870. Okay. The categorical distinction with the Winona case is that the office in that case, the preceding office holder held his office, under the law until his successor was elected and qualified. That's categorically different from how Minnesota legislators hold their offices. Minnesota legislators, their terms end on the first Monday in January, right, and that difference, I think, makes that case entirely inapplicable here. All right, I see my time is.
I was just going to say your time is expired, and I'm going to stop you. Thank you very much. We'll hear from Mr. Cousins. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hartshorn, I'm sorry. My colleagues had some more questions, even though your time has expired. Come back.
Man, come back.
Sorry, counsel. I did want to ask before you sat down quickly about your response to the latches argument. Your opposing counsel makes a pretty convincing argument as to latches given the holidays, the size of the practices that we're talking about, and an 8-day turnaround. Why is that not reasonable in response to their known right?
To a certain extent, I think the response would be a quote from The Godfather Part 2, which is that this is the business we've chosen. And election law is like that. Election law necessarily, and this court on the latches has explained that latches is a crucial doctrine in the election contest because deadlines inevitably are going to be very fast. As for the holidays, elections, especially special election processes, happen during the holidays, and I appreciated not having to work on New Year's Day. But if the idea is that we're going to file a legal proceeding that is going to invalidate at least a couple thousand folks' votes, that seems to me, I don't see that having to work on a holiday is much of a response to a latches concern. The pragmatics and the equities of the prejudice that are here, I think Mr. Cousins is in a better position to address, but that's what I'd say to that inquiry.
Counsel, if we get to the notice question, the lack of the 5-day notice, right. Your opponents have alleged actual harm here, and in particular, prospective candidate Shen and whether or not he was able to file. Two-part question. One, is actual harm a relevant thing for a 204B petition in this scenario? And were there alternatives for Mr. Shen other than appearing at the office and filing here in Minnesota?
Okay, to answer the second question first, yes, there is an alternative, and that is to have an agent, to have someone working for him deliver his paperwork. And I mean, he could have emailed that or faxed it to that agent and then had the agent turn it in. For the first question, I don't think that factual submission really is here or there. As we've demonstrated in our filings, it is absolutely ordinary in the history of these special election writs for notice periods to be announced that end less than 5 days after the writ is issued and that are of this kind of a duration. This is a perennial problem if Mr. Shen wants to call it a problem, and it's something that the legislature, in doing its weighing of the various interests here and having the election as soon as possible, is an overriding interest, as they've made clear. Has done that weighing and has decided that that notice periods of the length that are permitted here are lawful.
We have one more question of you, Mr. Hart.
This is just a factual question. So the thing that was the statute that was adopted in 1971 was 209.10 or subdivision 4?
It was under an entirely different numbering system, but it is the text that is now found at 204D 19 sub 4. I can find it in my notes.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
thanks.
Yeah, that was in June 1971 that text was first enacted. All right, thank you.
I think we're done. Thank you. Now, Mr. Cousins.
May it please the court, my name is Brad Cousins. I'm an assistant Ramsey County attorney. Today I'm representing Ramsey County, its auditor Tracy West, and its deputy director of election services, David Triplett. The county respondents have limited their response to the petition to the issue of latches, and that's what I'd like to discuss with the court today. As you know, that is a discretionary doctrine that Minnesota courts apply where there has been an unreasonable delay in asserting a right, resulting in prejudice to others such that it would be inequitable to grant the relief sought. So I'd like to discuss that delay and that prejudice from the county's perspective. The delay was 8 days. In other contexts, that would not be unreasonable. Here, though, that 8 days constituted about half of the time between the issuance of the writ and the primary day, and about a quarter of the time between the writ and the special election day. So on its face, the county would say that that was an unreasonable delay. Moreover, the court doesn't have other information as to why that delay may have been reasonable, why there was diligence on the part of petitioners, because it wasn't included in their briefing. They haven't provided that direct information. There's no timeline. What they have provided on page 25 of their reply brief is a laundry list of items that one may do when drafting a petition like this, but they don't even say that they did those items. Despite that lack of specifics, the court does know and can know when they were aware of the writ and aware of that right, because it can impute that knowledge to them. That's under the Monahan case cited by the state in its brief. The court can impute the knowledge of public records that are election related when addressing the issue of latches. So the petitioners are imputed to have known on December 27th of this right. They haven't provided the court with evidence as to how they might have been diligent in pursuing that right. Nevertheless, the court does have abundant evidence before it of the second part of the latches analysis, which is the prejudice.
Would the county have done anything differently if petitioners had filed their petition 2 or 3 days earlier, or would the county have just continued with its preparations?
So first off, thank you for the question. The preparations are cumulative, right? Every day matters. If the petitioners had filed this a week earlier than they had, then the court would have made its decision a week earlier than it's going to, and the county's outlay of resources would be much smaller. Beyond that, the county may have had the opportunity to adjust its timeline if it had been aware of this earlier, but it wasn't. The county announced the day before the petition was filed that absentee balloting would start on January 10th. And it did that after being notified that there was going to be no primary in this case, because state law dictates that while we have special election rules for election administration, other election rules apply to the extent practicable. So to the extent that the county could practically start absentee balloting as close as possible to the normal timeline, it had an obligation to do so and has proceeded on that timeline to try to comply with the governor's writ.
Council, is there evidence in the public record as to how many voters in District 40B have cast ballots up to now?
In the public record, there is evidence of the number of absentee ballots that have been mailed out by the county. I can update the court that that number is now 1,204 absentee ballots that have been mailed out by the county, and the county anticipates beginning to receive those back either by drop-off or in mail imminently based on prior election practices. The county's also printed or ordered 43,250 ballots and estimates that it's expended 528 hours of staff time as of today and incurred $15,000 in obligations to vendors for ballot printing and related services. When considering the prejudice issue under latches, the court considers prejudice to election officials, voters, and other candidates. Here, clearly, we have prejudice as to both the election officials and the voters. You can see from the affidavit of Mr. Triplett before you all the preparations the county has taken. And to the extent that the court might invalidate that writ, the costs borne by the county have been greatly increased by petitioners' delay in filing this suit. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any further questions the court may have.
Looks like we're good, counsel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, you now have 10 minutes of rebuttal.
Your Honors, I'd like to address first off, one of the things that we heard from my friends on the other side here, which is that the governor ordinarily, or governors in the past have ordinarily violated law by issuing writs with an inadequate affidavit of candidacy filing deadline. This court said in Page v. Carlson that just because governors in the past have not complied with the law, that's not before this court. Challenges weren't brought in the past. What's before this court is this issue. And this court should take the opportunity to say that the governor should follow the law, regardless of whether governors in the past have not.
What do you make of the argument that the third option under subdivision 4 is unconstitutional? Basically, that there's three options in the statute. One, the legislature can just decide to do nothing, in which case under the statute it would be the however many days, I can't remember.
22 days.
22 days, thank you. Or they can say we're going to basically accept the decision of the election contest, or they can say we're not going to accept it and we're going to have a hearing in the House. And so as to that first option, I think the argument is that's unconstitutional under Pavlak. What do you say about that?
On the 22-day?
The option that they can just choose to do nothing and then the 22-day kicks in as a default, kind of the default option, I guess.
I mean, the legislature isn't here, I guess, arguing on their behalf, but the legislature, the governor, chose to bound themselves to these rules, and it's passed in statute. And so I guess if they were to violate that statute, a contest could be made. But for now, this is the law on the books, and there's been no constitutional issue.
When I'm reading Pavlak, I don't see any discussion of subdivision 4. That was about 209.10, I think, but maybe the implication is that's the case. That wasn't about a special election, that case, right?
Correct, no.
Okay.
I do also want to mention that one of the things we heard is this definition of incumbent. And I think it's helpful to walk through how the statutes should work. There's a potential vacancy. You think there might be a vacancy. The governor's wondering if there's a vacancy. You go to the statute, special elections when held. You start there and you figure out which of these 4 subdivisions apply. We believe it's subdivision 4 for the reasons we stated, but if you believed it was subdivision 2, then you would ask, well, when under subdivision 2 do we call a special election? And it says in here, when a vacancy occurs. Then you have to ask, when does a vacancy occur? We have an on-point statute on that, 351, 01 and 02 together.
I think they would argue, well, they are arguing that he was a future incumbent, so that he could, they're basically, he's an incumbent he's a person that will be an incumbent in the future on January 6th or whenever. And so he actually is an incumbent who is resigning. What about that?
That would stretch the meaning of incumbent. It would add the word future to incumbent. The statutes.
Well, I think they're trying to read 351.055 and 351.01 and 02 together, right?
We never get to 351.055 if you're marching through the statutes in this order. Again, if you start with the specific when 40D19.
So your argument is you actually have to be an incumbent, and then who resigns, and then you could project into the future. But until you can't go back, do the reverse.
Right. And under my friend's reading here, I guess they could have argued that a vacancy occurred on the first day of the term, which would have been January 6th. So if that was the case, the writ could have been issued on the first day of term. And if I look at the timing, I believe that they could have had a full 5-day notice then, and then time for a primary and a special, and still held the election on the same day. What that would have done had they reissued the writ when the term, when the true vacancy arose, which would have been under their reading the 6th, there would be no prejudice to anybody because all the timelines would have been, could have been held along the current plan. The only difference being there would have been a full 5 days for people to file. So there's no reason that they couldn't have complied with all of the laws under their reading that a vacancy arose the first day of the term. Now there are issues with that reading. It's an open question as to when one becomes a member. Is it when you're sworn? Is it when the term started? Normally those things are closer together than they are.
Well, it strikes me. I mean, I was going back to chapter 3 on the certificate of whatever it's called, election or what, I guess. And that seems to suggest that the person that to become a member, you have to take your certificate of election and actually present it, which Mr. Johnson didn't do. So, but I don't know if, I guess the question is, can he exercise that power before the first day of session and not show up? I mean, say that I'm not going to use it.
We think that if the legislature wanted somebody to be able to abandon their claim to an office, to disclaim their election certificate, that they would have put a statutory scheme in place to do that, just like they did for current incumbents. And it's very specific as to what they have to do to bind themselves. The statute binds them to that resignation. They can't withdraw it after the writ is issued, but there's no statutory language provided.
I mean, that would just suggest maybe January 6th is not the date, but the first day of session, I guess.
Correct. In either scenario, it was premature.
Do you see a conflict between 055 and subdivision 4? And if there is a conflict, how do you think it should be resolved?
Well, we start with the specific, which is subdivision 4 and all of 19. And 055 under our reading of the plain language, the title is preparing for elections.
Well, I'm assuming we're disagreeing on that, and that a writ could be under 055. You still would be the specific.
Yeah, we still will go to the specific, which is that there was an election contest. I mean, if not, what did Mr. Johnson undertake? If not an election contest, there was a decision ordered by the court. I know of no case where a defendant, in essence, in this case, a defendant can moot his own case. And certainly there's no statutory provision to be able to do that in the law. And again, we need certainty. And so if the legislature was going to allow someone to abandon their office, we need to know how firm that abandonment is. Are they going to change their mind? What if they did show up on the first day of session and try to present it, but we already have an election that is going? Again, the legislature has not spoken here, and in the absence of them speaking and giving that right, he simply can't do what he did. He had to wait.
What do you make of the argument that Benedict is kind of irrelevant here, that it's distinguishable in a meaningful way? I think that's what I'm just responding to.
There was
I think their argument is that was not a state legislative election, and so that makes it different.
There are holdover provisions, and the current office holder could have held over, and so they said there was no vacancy in the office. But again, it goes to, this is someone that had a claim to take the office. I think in that case it was January 1st or 2nd, and they died, and that did not create a vacancy. Just like when Mr. Johnson resigned, Jamie Becker-Finn was the current representative at the time. And so whatever he did, I say resign, again, this is difficult. He typically did not resign. If one has a job offer to start at a new job 6 months from now, and I decide not to take it, I don't call up my future employer and say, I'm resigning. That stretches the meaning of the word resign beyond its ordinary meaning. And so he simply did not resign from something that he didn't yet possess. And so, again, should the legislature perhaps account for these situations in statute? Maybe. Or maybe they don't want people to be able to easily abandon their office in their interim. I mean, we did not get into this in the brief because it would have taken us down some pretty significant rabbit holes, but there was a debate early on whether somebody has ability to resign at all. This has to deal with the U.S. House of Representatives, and so it's not clear the degree at which somebody, this isn't like holding a job where we now see is at will. The voter spoke, they elected this person, and there's good reason why the legislature may want to make it very difficult for somebody to abandon their election certificate. And again, I go back to, we have an on-point statute. If we just start marching through from 19 forward, this tells us which one of these subdivisions apply. If it's under subdivision 2, what is a vacancy? It's of an incumbent. There are very limited times when an incumbent can resign. There are very specific statutes that prescribe how they can, so that they have to be bound by that. And 055, again, we view it as preparing for the election. It's to be able to get the machinery in place. I know we talked about this in our briefs. We went through all of the writs we could find that were available, and the pattern of what the governors did before and after 3055 didn't change at all. There was the same types of writs were issued before and after. We don't see any change in practice. And to the extent there are underlying here, depending on this court holds, there are some potential separation of powers issues, some constitutional issues. And the easiest way out, again, is to look at the 5-day notice period and say that notice period was mandatory. The governor, it says he has to provide, the election laws require there be a 5-day notice for candidates to file, whether it's this particular candidate, Alan Shen, or somebody else. And again, this isn't about Alan Shen's particular injury. The Republican Party discusses how they would have gone and had used this time. They relied on the statutes to be able to go into order their business so that they could go recruit additional candidates. And we think that this court should hold the governor to the letter of the law, which requires 5-day notice. And there are some examples of impossibilities that my friends included. We included a counter impossibility that has nothing to do with abandoning this 5-day period. And so those aren't the facts before this court. And if that comes before this court will have to decide if in that particular instance, the statute should be directory versus mandatory. But the court has said before an election, we're going to hold officials accountable to the letter of the law.
Counsel,
no, go ahead, Justice Moore.
On the latches issue that Ramsey County is addressing, your suggestion in your brief was that the prudent thing for Ramsey County to have done was to have halted printing ballots and basically any staff work on a special election that the governor had issued a writ for.
Right.
Am I reading you correctly? Am I hearing your argument right on that?
Yes, Your Honor. We have Hennepin County in a situation where Don Samuels v. City of Minneapolis, court file 277-21-1060. They put an affidavit in that when a petition was filed, they stopped printing and procedures that next day. And so clearly the county was capable of halting what it was doing and not incurring more expenses. But it gets back to, if part of the prejudice, if part of the idea that we sat on a known right gets to the fact that the exigency was created by the merits, I think we have to reach the merits first to be able to understand or to be able to see whether they created the exigency that then we have to deal with.
Counsel, I just wanted to confirm with you again that when you say it's the governor would have 5 days under your theory to issue the writ, that's assuming we agree with you that the resolution by the House yesterday was valid, correct? I mean, that's what you and I talked about, I think, earlier.
What this court could be correct, and what this court could say if it didn't want to reach that issue is whether it was 5 days or 22 days, surely 18 days before it was not valid. And so it'll be up to the governor at that point to decide, does he want to issue it within the 5 days of the House resolution? Does he want to wait for the 22 days to expire? That issue isn't before this court yet. This court can say in either case, whatever it might be, whether there was a quorum or not, whether the resolution was valid or not, the governor either has to wait 5 or 22 days, and that issue can be addressed once the governor issues the writ.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No. What if that doesn't get decided before the 5 days expires?
Pardon?
What if that doesn't get decided before the 5 days expires? Is that just up to the governor to make that decision?
Correct, and that could be a basis for another challenge.
That's encouraging news.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I think we're good. I want to thank all counsel for the help that you've provided to the court here today. The matter was well briefed by all sides, well argued by all sides, and the court really
argued.
appreciates that.
Well argued.
And we will make our decision as soon as we can.
Hopefully.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
That's, I want to show something because there's a lot of people here that are, I wonder, there's over 2,880 people watching on Twitter, right? And it makes me wonder how many of those are from my community, right? How many of those that are trying to inform themselves to make their communities better, right? So, and I want to read a part before I get up out of here, is that, because I'm over, is that, activists raise concerns over a nonprofit monitoring Minneapolis police, the firm ELEFA, has also faced criticism from activists who question whether that city has achieved enough reforms to exit its city consent decree. So people need to stay informed. I know it's a tough battle. You know what I'm saying? I'm one of them that I've been doing this for a minute. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't get easy. It doesn't get any easier because it seems like every year they make it harder. But I think we have the weapons to fight fire with fire. And I don't mean pick up a gun. I don't mean to go pick up no, to go strike them. I'm saying go pick up a book. Go pick up the legislation so that we can fight the fire with fire. Just like, that's what Ryan Winkler, I like that guy because he, even Jim Schultz, I don't always agree with what he says, but he allows people to understand that there is a way to fight. There is a way to fight the system. So with that being said, man, I'm going to get up out of here. You guys have a great day. Win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell, wish me well. But tomorrow I'm really not going to, I am going to do a podcast, but tomorrow is the release of my album, The Nation. I'm going to play that. I'm proud and I worked hard on it and I did a lot of soul searching, and I probably won't just play the album, and I also just play my first one because it really just shows how much growth that I've really done. So here is No Justice, No Peace, Anthem for the Streets, Part 1. And this is from the Urban Conservative. And with that being said, man, I'm going to get up out of here. Win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell. Wish me well, and y'all have a great one, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Amanda was light, Jasmine was a king. Now they rest in silence, where angels sing. I see the sirens dance across cracked window. The hood cries out, but nobody knows. 5 deep they storm like wolves on prey. But their badges ain't justice, just fears on display. Mama said stay low, keep your head to the ground. But how you supposed to breathe when they're holding you down? Choking dreams out of brothers, like the wind don't blow. And sisters screaming prayers where the roses won't grow. How many tears gotta stain this ground? How many voices lost, never found? Amanda was light, Jasmine was a king. Now they rest in silence, where angels sing. But silence ain't peace. It's a scream unheard. A cage built a ray in 4-letter word. Amanda was light, Jasmine was a king. Now they rest in silence, where angels sing. History's a loop. Got us locked in this fight. Still dodging the dark in the shadow of the night. They flood these streets with promises stand. But the weight of their words brush it where we begin. Serve and protect as a flag they wave. But we bury too many beneath unmarked grave. Say her name, say his name. Feel the weight. It's a eulogy written by the hands of hate. Flashing lights, screaming nights, another one gone, and we leapt to mourn through the pain of a song. Amanda was light, Gasmir was a king. Now they rest in silence where angels sing. Amanda was light, Gasmir was a king. Now they rest in silence where angels sing. I hear their cries echo loud in my veins. Blood of my kin spilled like summer rain. Amanda's smile was a sunrise to see. Now her name's on the shirt that her mama can't free. Gasmir stood tall, a king in his skin, but they turned his throne to a coffin within. No apology, no justice. Just dust, and we left with the question, does anyone care? No apology, no apology. Just dust in the air, and we left with the question, does anyone care? Does anyone care? Now they rest, does anyone care? Or angels sing, does anyone care?